What does it mean to stand in a place where the world stops making promises? Most of us move through life wrapped in layers of quiet protection. Roads are mapped. Signals travel through the air. A call brings help. A mistake, however painful, is usually followed by another chance. We live with the comforting illusion that the planet has been softened for us, made navigable by medicine, law, machines, and light. Yet scattered across the earth are places where that illusion falls away all at once. Some of them are beautiful at first glance. An island rising green from the sea, a narrow stream passing through an old English wood, a still lake under evening sky, a desert painted in astonishing colors, a distant shore where a people have chosen silence over contact, a ruined chamber built by modern ambition, still warm with consequences. None of these places announces itself with a warning loud enough for the human heart. That may be what makes them so unsettling. They do not look like endings. They look like landscapes, and maybe that is the deeper story here. Danger does not always arrive wearing the face we expect. Sometimes it appears as paradise, or curiosity, or progress. Sometimes it waits beneath the surface of ordinary things: water, stone, heat, memory, pride. We step closer because we want to understand. Because wonder and risk have always lived side by side. Because every generation believes it can cross one more line and come back unchanged. In the chapters ahead, we will travel through 6 locations that test the limits of survival, but also the limits of certainty. These are not merely stories about lethal ground or hostile conditions. They are stories about human beings meeting forces older, stranger, and larger than themselves. And the question that follows us into each one is not only how people vanish there, it is why we keep going closer. What turns an island into a warning? Off the coast of Brazil, where the Atlantic glitters under a forgiving sun, there is a piece of land that seems almost too lovely to fear. From a distance, it rises out of the water like a private dream: green slopes, dark rock, a lighthouse looking out toward the horizon. You could imagine solitude there: salt wind, bird song, the kind of silence people travel great distances to find. But some landscapes keep a different kind of silence. Ilha de Queimada Grande, better known as Snake Island, is one of those places where beauty and threat became inseparable over time. The story reaches many visitors first through rumor. A keeper's family trapped in a house and as snakes slipped through windows, floorboards, and shadowed corners, until the island itself seemed to move. Whether every detail of that tale is true almost no longer matters. Like all enduring legends, it survives because it captures an emotional fact. On this island, human confidence shrinks very quickly. The reality is no less haunting for being scientific. Long ago, rising seas severed this outcrop from the mainland. Isolation did the rest. Snakes already living there found themselves in a world with few predators and little ground prey. To survive, they adapted to the only dependable food source that remained: migratory birds landing briefly in the trees. Over generations, venom grew faster, stronger, more efficient. Nature refined a weapon not out of malice but necessity. That is the unsettling truth. Nothing here was designed to terrify us. The island did not become lethal because it hated intruders. It became lethal because life, when cornered, learns precision. Today, the island stands mostly untouched, guarded less by fences than by biological reality. And perhaps that is what lingers after the facts are known: the realization that evolution can create a place so finely tuned to survival that human presence feels not merely unwelcome, but irrelevant. We often imagine danger as chaos. But what if the most unsettling danger is order? Life becoming exactly what it needed to be, with no space left for us. How can something so narrow hold so much violence? In the Yorkshire countryside, not far from the worn stones of Bolton Abbey, the river seems to lose its temper in secret. Upstream, it moves with the familiar breath of English water: cool, green, measured. Then, quite suddenly, the landscape constricts. The river is forced into a channel so tight, so deceptively modest, that from the bank it can appear almost playful. A confident stride, a small leap, barely more than a meter in places. It looks less like a threat than a dare. That illusion has drawn people close for centuries. The place is known as the Strid, and its danger lies in the mismatch between appearance, and reality. The surface can seem smooth, even elegant, slipping over dark rock with a polished calm. Leaves gather in quiet eddies. Moss softens the edges. Nothing about it resembles catastrophe. Yet beneath that narrow band of water is something far less gentle. A river compressed into depth, folded into hidden chambers, driven through underwater passages carved by time into limestone and stone. Those who fall in are not simply swept away. They are taken downward into a submerged architecture of force. The current is not broad enough to watch and fear properly. It is concentrated, muscular, and immediate. Water surges into crevices, rebounds off rock, twists through fissures too small to see from above. Rescue becomes nearly impossible because the danger is not just speed, it is entrapment. The river does not only carry a body, it holds it. So legends grew, as legends always do, where explanation feels emotionally insufficient. Spirits in the water, a curse in the valley, a doorway beneath the stream. People reach for myth because the truth seemed too strange. That ordinary water, narrowed by stone, could become so final. Perhaps that is what the Strid teaches. Not every deadly thing announces itself through noise or scale. Some dangers are quiet enough to invite trust. They wait in the gap between what we see and what is there. And how much of life, after all, is shaped by that same perilous distance. What can terror look like when it leaves no wound behind? In northwestern Cameroon, Lake Nyos rests inside the bowl of an ancient volcano. By day, it can seem almost pastoral. Still water, green slopes, small villages scattered across the surrounding hills. In the mid-1980s, families there lived by the old rhythms of farming life. Cattle moved through the grass, evening fires were lit, children drifted home at dusk. There was nothing in the appearance of the lake to suggest that it was storing catastrophe in silence. Then one night in August 1986, the valley changed without warning. Some people later recalled hearing a low sound from the direction of the water, something like distant thunder or a heavy breath in the dark. It was not enough to alarm anyone. Houses settled into sleep. Lamps went out. The hills disappeared into night. By morning, entire communities had fallen still. People were found where evening had left them, beside beds, near doorways, close to hearths gone cold. Animals lay in the fields. The buildings remained standing. There was no sign of struggle, almost no sign of event, only an immense and unnatural quiet. The explanation, when it came, was as sobering as it was strange. Deep below the lake, volcanic gases had been seeping upward for years, dissolving into the cold bottom waters under pressure. Then, for reasons still debated, the balance broke. The lake released a vast cloud of carbon dioxide in a single violent exhalation. Because the gas was heavier than air, it did not rise into the sky. It flowed downward, hugging the earth, filling low ground and villages, pushing oxygen away as it went. People did not run because there was almost nothing to run from that the eye could see. Lake Nyos forces us to confront a difficult kind of vulnerability. We are taught to fear what looks dangerous: fire, teeth, storms, weapons. But some of the gravest forces in this world are invisible, patient, and entirely indifferent to human timing. And perhaps that is what unsettles us most. The idea that the earth can keep its secrets for centuries and reveal them in a single breath. What does the earth look like when it seems to remember its own creation? In northeastern Ethiopia, the land opens into a basin so stark and chemically vivid that it can feel less like geography than revelation. The Danakil Depression does not greet visitors with softness. It shimmers, it hisses, it burns. Salt flats stretch pale and blinding beneath a merciless sky, while beyond them rise patches of yellow, green, orange, and rust red so intense they seem painted by an imagination too bold for realism. At first glance, the place is breathtaking. A second glance is enough to understand that beauty here comes with terms. The heat is not merely uncomfortable, it is intimate, oppressive, nearly personal. Air presses against the skin like a living weight. Metal grows too hot to touch. Breath carries the sharp bitterness of sulfur. Even standing still can feel like labor. And underfoot, what appears solid is not always trustworthy. Thin crusts of mineral can conceal scalding mud, acidic pools, or ground so unstable that a single careless step becomes an injury. Yet this harshness is not random. Danakil is one of the rare places on Earth where the crust itself is being pulled apart. Tectonic plates drift away from one another here, slowly, relentlessly, thinning the boundary between surface and molten interior. Heat rises, minerals erupt, water and gas react in strange combinations. The brilliant colors are not decorative accidents. They are chemistry made visible, the planet exposing processes we normally never see. For centuries, people have answered such a landscape with myth. It is easy to understand why. A place this severe seems to demand a story larger than geology. But perhaps science in this case is not a demystification. It is a deeper kind of awe. The ground is not cursed. It is alive in a timescale that ignores us. And still, people cross it. Salt workers move through the heat with a discipline earned over generations, cutting white slabs from the earth and carrying them across the desert. Their presence changes the meaning of the place. Danakil is not only a portrait of danger, it is also a reminder that human endurance, too, can become a form of knowledge. So maybe the question is not why such a place exists. Maybe it is what it asks of anyone who dares to see it clearly. What does it mean to meet a people who have chosen distance as a form of survival? In the Bay of Bengal, beyond busy shipping routes and the restless traffic of the modern world, lies North Sentinel Island. From above, it appears almost timeless, a dense canopy of green ringed by pale beaches and coral reefs, the sort of place travel brochures once taught us to imagine as untouched paradise. But this island carries a different meaning. It is not waiting to be discovered. It has already decided with remarkable consistency that it does not wish to be entered. That refusal has echoed across decades. Outsiders who drift too near have seen figures on the shore with bows drawn, bodies poised between warning and defense. A grounded ship became a brief stage for this ancient message, its stranded crew watching armed islanders gather on the beach as rescue helicopters prepared to lift them away. Years later, the death of a young missionary who attempted contact brought the island back into global consciousness, and with it came the old impulse to frame the story as mystery, menace, or tragedy. Yet those interpretations often say more about us than about the people on the shore. The Sentinelese do not represent a puzzle waiting for modern hands to solve. Their resistance is not theatrical. It is historical. Across the colonial era and after, isolated communities around the world learned that outside contact often arrived with kidnapping, humiliation, disease, and death. Even a gesture meant as friendly could become lethal when carried across such a biological and cultural distance. To remain apart, then, is not ignorance. It is wisdom sharpened by memory. There is a profound irony here. We tend to describe North Sentinel Island as dangerous because strangers may be met with arrows. But the greater danger may be the one we bring: viruses, assumptions, conquest disguised as curiosity. The island asks an uncomfortable question of the modern imagination. Can we accept that not everything meaningful belongs to our reach? Perhaps respect begins there, not in crossing every boundary, but in recognizing that some forms of human dignity survive precisely because a boundary was held. What happens when danger is no longer ancient, but engineered? In northern Ukraine, inside the Chernobyl exclusion zone, there is a darkness that does not feel empty. It feels inhabited by consequence. Long after the explosion of reactor number 4 in April 1986, after the first panic, after the evacuations, after the cameras had fixed the disaster in the world's imagination, work continued in the broken interior of the plant. Men descended into corridors warped by heat and force, carrying lamps, instruments, and the uneasy knowledge that what they were approaching could not be negotiated with. Somewhere beneath the reactor, something had formed. They found it in the ruined basement levels, a massive blackened shape slumped like cooling lava, ridged and folded as if it had once flowed with terrible intent before freezing in place. It would later be called the elephant's foot, a name almost too gentle for what it was. This was not simply debris. It was a new substance born from catastrophe. Nuclear fuel, concrete, sand, steel, and reactor materials melted together under extraordinary temperatures, then hardened into one of the most toxic objects ever created. The photographs of it have an uncanny quality, not only because of what they show, but because of the conditions under which they were taken. Radiation there was so intense that exposure was measured not in abstract units, but in shrinking human futures. To stand near it for even brief periods carried a cost. Time itself became material. Seconds mattered. Distance mattered. Every movement was calculated against damage already being done. And that may be what separates Chernobyl from the places that came before. Snake venom, violent water, volcanic gas, corrosive earth, these belong to natural systems, however lethal. The elephant's foot belongs to us. It is a monument not to wilderness, but to intellect without full control, to ambition outrunning humility. We often speak of technology as proof of mastery, but mastery, in the deepest sense, may include knowing when a force is too large to hold safely in human hands. If nature teaches respect through distance, then Chernobyl teaches it through aftermath, and through the haunting fact that some of our most dangerous landscapes are the ones we build ourselves. Why are we drawn to places that could erase us? By the time we have seen an island ruled by venom, a river that hides its violence, a lake that breathes death, a desert bright with corrosive heat, a shoreline guarded by memory, and a ruin still radiating the force of human error, a pattern begins to emerge. These places are radically different in form, history, and cause, yet they speak in a strangely unified voice. Each one strips away the ordinary assumptions that make daily life feel stable. Each one reminds us that safety is often local, temporary, and deeply contingent. And still, we keep looking. Part of that impulse is practical. We study danger because knowledge has always been one of the few tools that can widen the margin between survival and loss. Scientists measure gas in volcanic lakes. Geologists map unstable ground. Biologists track isolated species. Engineers build shields around failed reactors. Governments draw exclusion zones and warning lines. In this sense, curiosity is not recklessness. It is how human beings learn to live with a world that was never designed for our comfort. But there is another reason we return to such places, and it is less easy to quantify. Dangerous landscapes confront us with scale. They place a human life beside forces that are older than civilization or more enduring than a single generation's plans. Evolution on a remote island, water carving stone over centuries, tectonic plates drifting beneath a desert, radiation lingering long after the hands that unleashed it are gone. In these settings, our dramas shrink, but they do not disappear. They become clearer. Perhaps that is why such places haunt the imagination. They do not merely threaten the body, they challenge the story we tell about ourselves as central, protected, and in control. They ask whether intelligence is the same thing as wisdom, whether access is the same thing as understanding, whether every frontier deserves to be crossed simply because it can be named. The fascination, then, may not be with danger alone. It may be with the rare and unsettling relief of standing before something that does not care who we are, and realizing how much truth can live in that indifference. What is the boundary if not a story about where human certainty ends? Every dangerous place we have visited is marked by a line, though not always one drawn on a map. Sometimes the line is legal, a government ban, a restricted zone, a coastline no boat should approach. Sometimes it is physical, a narrow ledge, a pocket of geese, a patch of ground too thin to trust. And sometimes it is invisible, existing only in the gap between what a place appears to be and what it truly is. We cross such lines more often than we realize. Modern life encourages a quiet faith in access. If a satellite can photograph it, if a route can be traced, if a machine can carry us there, then perhaps it belongs within the realm of the possible. But possibility is not permission. A place can be reachable and still remain, in every meaningful sense, beyond us. That distinction matters. It may be one of the last disciplines that keeps curiosity from becoming intrusion. Think of the shoreline of North Sentinel, where distance preserves a people. Think of the sealed chambers of Chernobyl, where barriers now protect future generations from an accident still unfolding in slow motion. Think of Snake Island, where the prohibition is not merely political, but biological. In each case, the boundary is not an insult to human freedom. It is an acknowledgement of reality. To honor it is not surrender, it is maturity. There is a humility in that idea that modern culture does not always celebrate. We admire explorers, builders, pioneers, those who refuse limits. and sometimes that admiration is deserved. But wisdom has another face. It knows that restraint can be as brave as conquest, that not entering can also be a form of understanding, that reverence sometimes looks like staying back from the edge. Perhaps the deepest lesson of these landscapes is this: the world is not divided simply into what is known and unknown, safe and unsafe, open and closed. It is divided into relationships. Some places invite us to learn. Others demand that we listen from a distance. And the hardest question may not be whether we can cross the line. It may be whether we have learned enough to know when we should not. How does fear become memory and memory become myth? Long before these places were measured, regulated, or studied, they were narrated. People told stories because stories were the first maps. A deadly river became the work of spirits. A poisoned island gathered legends of hidden treasure and punishment. A silent lake, after taking whole villages in a night, seemed to confirm that unseen powers were listening. Even now, in an age of satellites and sensors, the instinct remains. When a place exceeds our ordinary language of cause and effect, we do what human beings have always done. We reach for metaphor. That impulse is not foolish. It is deeply human. Myth, at its best, is not the opposite of truth. It is one way truth survives before instruments arrive. A warning wrapped in imagination can travel farther than a scientific report. Do not cross there. Do not drink from that pool. Do not approach that shore. Be careful near this water. Fear sharpens memory, and memory, retold enough times, takes on the gravity of folklore. The details may bend, but the caution remains. Science later enters and offers another form of seeing. It explains the evolutionary isolation of snakes, the hydraulics of compressed water, the physics of suffocating gas, the chemistry of corrosive mineral fields, the epidemiological risk of contact, the material aftermath of nuclear heat. These explanations matter. They save lives. They replace superstition with understanding. And yet understanding does not erase wonder. In some cases, it deepens it. The truth is not less astonishing because it can be described. A lake capable of storing invisible death is not less haunting because we know the mechanism. Maybe that is why these stories endure. Human beings need both languages, the poetic one that helps us feel the scale of danger, and the factual one that helps us survive it. One gives meaning, the other gives clarity. Between them lies something like wisdom. And perhaps the most enduring myths are not the ones that deny reality, but the ones that teach us, however imperfectly, how to live within it. What survives when a place seems designed to destroy? It is tempting to think of dangerous landscapes only in terms of endings. A fatal bite, a body pulled under, a village gone quiet, a misstep into acid, an arrow from the tree line, a sickness of the cell that unfolds years after exposure. Yet that is only part of the story. Look more carefully and another pattern appears. Not just death, but adaptation. Not just peril, but life discovering unexpected ways to remain. On Snake Island, life sharpened itself to meet scarcity. In the Danakil Depression, microorganisms endure in chemistry that resembles another planet more than the Earth of ordinary imagination. Around Lake Nyos, engineers and local communities learned how to read and reduce a hidden threat. The Sentinel Island, through fierce distance, have preserved a continuity of existence that the modern world often mistakes for fragility. Even in Chernobyl, where contamination reshaped the meaning of place, the surrounding zone has become an uneasy refuge for plants and animals reclaiming abandoned ground. None of this cancels the suffering attached to these places. Survival is not a romantic correction to tragedy, but it does complicate the picture in an important way. The world is not merely hostile, and humanity is not merely vulnerable. Both are more intricate than that. Danger and resilience are often braided together, where each revealing the other. There is something quietly corrective in this realization. We often measure strength by domination, the ability to control, to extract, to remain untouched. But the forms of endurance visible in these landscapes suggest another definition. Strength may also be the ability to adjust without illusion, to recognize what a place is and shape behavior accordingly. Not victory over reality, but relationship with it. Perhaps that is why these places continue to hold our attention. They are not simply theaters of fear. They are laboratories of humility, where life persists under conditions that seem impossible until we witness it. And once we do, the question changes. It is no longer only how a place kills, it is also how anything, including us, learns to live there at all. What do these places reveal about the future we are already entering? For much of human history, danger was something we approached from the outside. A storm on the horizon, a wilderness beyond the village, a mountain, a marsh, a predator, a sea. The threatening places we have explored still carry that ancient shape, but together they suggest something more modern as well. The boundary between natural hazard and human consequence is becoming harder to separate. Again and again, we find ourselves not only discovering slightly dangerous worlds, but participating in their creation, amplification, or meaning. Chernobyl makes this impossible to ignore. Its danger is inseparable from engineering, secrecy, urgency, and the belief that immense power could be fully mastered. But even the more ancient landscapes are now seen through human influence. Climate shifts alter coastlines and ecosystems. Population pressure pushes tourism toward fragile environments. Technology gives more people the illusion that remoteness can be overcome without cost. A place once protected by distance may now be threatened by access alone. This does not mean the world is becoming less knowable. In many ways, we understand more than ever. We can monitor gases beneath lakes, map tectonic strain, detect radiation, track species, predict certain forms of collapse. Yet knowledge has not removed risk. It has only made our responsibility harder to avoid. We cannot claim innocence as easily once we can measure the consequences of our actions. So the future may depend less on whether we can reach every place and more on the ethics we bring when we do. Exploration without reverence becomes extraction. Curiosity without restraint becomes harm. Progress without memory repeats the very disasters it claims to outgrow. That may be the quiet lesson hidden beneath all these landscapes. The world does not simply ask us to be brave. It asks us to be worthy of what we know, to carry knowledge carefully, to admit that power, whether scientific or technological, is not wisdom by itself. And in that sense, the most dangerous place on Earth may not be a river, a desert, or a ruined reactor. It may be the human mind when it forgets that understanding should make us gentler, not bolder alone. What do we carry back from places we should never stay? By now, the journey has moved beyond a catalog of hazards. The island, the river, the lake, the desert, the guarded shore, the radioactive ruin. Each began as a location on a map, but none remained merely geographic. They became mirrors. In each one, something human was exposed. Our appetite for certainty, our romance with trespass, our trust in appearances, our habit of forgetting how small we are. And yet smallness is not the same as insignificance. There is a quiet dignity in recognizing limits. To stand before a lethal landscape and feel awe is not weakness. It may be one of the most honest responses available to us. Awe restores proportion. It interrupts the noisy story in which everything must be conquered, photographed, explained, possessed. Some places return us to a more ancient posture, the posture of listening, of watching, of understanding that the world is not a stage built for human intention alone. That understanding can follow us home. It changes the way we read ordinary things. Water becomes less decorative and more alive. Heat becomes not just weather, but force. Silence becomes something to notice, not merely fill. Even our technologies look different when held against the memory of a ruined reactor still radiating decades later. We begin to see that danger is not always distant. It lives in systems, choices, and assumptions. It waits wherever confidence outruns respect. But perhaps the deeper gift of these places is not fear. It is perspective. They remind us that fragility is universal. The bird above Snake Island, the villager near Nyos, the worker at Chernobyl, the child on a remote shore, the traveler drawn too close to the Strahd, all are held within the same unfinished story of survival. Different lives, different risks, one shared condition. We are temporary creatures moving across an ancient Earth. To remember that is not bleak. It is clarifying. It can make us more careful with one another, more attentive to the ground beneath us, more reverent toward what exceeds us. And maybe that is the real reason such places stay in memory long after we leave them. They do not just show us where death lives. They show us with unusual precision what it means to be alive. What remains after the last image fades is not simply a list of dangerous places. It is a changed way of seeing. We began with the assumption most of us carry without naming, that the world, for all its uncertainty, is broadly arranged to let us pass through it. Roads hold, rivers can be crossed, islands can be reached. Knowledge protects us. Technology extends us. And often within the boundaries of ordinary life, those assumptions are useful. They help us build, plan, and love without being paralyzed by risk. But the places we have visited together offer another perspective. They remind us that our safety is not the natural state of the earth. It is a fragile achievement, local and temporary, maintained by attention. Snake Island showed us evolution without sentiment. The Strid showed us violence concealed inside elegance. Lake Nyos revealed that an invisible force can alter history overnight. Danakil exposed a world so chemically fierce, it feels almost pre-human. North Sentinel confronted us with the ethics of distance and the dignity of an untouched boundary. Chernobyl, perhaps the most haunting of all, forced us to face the enduring consequences of our own reach. Different places, different dangers. One message repeated in many forms: respect is not optional. And yet this journey was never only about fear. It was about relationship, between human beings and landscapes, between curiosity and restraint, between memory and myth, science and wonder, survival and humility. These places matter not because they are deadly, but because they reveal something essential. Truth does not always arrive as comfort. Sometimes it arrives as proportion. It reminds us that we are brilliant, vulnerable creatures standing on a planet whose depths we still do not fully understand. Maybe that is the lasting question. Not how many dangerous places remain on Earth, but whether we can learn to meet them and one another with enough wisdom to keep wonder from becoming harm. Because in the end, the most human response to a perilous world is not conquest, it is reverence.